Chapter 2, Section 3 is solving multi-step equations. So we're taking this a step further than what we did in Section 2. Section 2 was dealing with one-step equations where we added or subtracted or multiplied or divided. Now we're going to start combining some of those things. So what I want to show you guys here is on this first example, there's actually a couple of different ways that I could go about solving this equation. So the first way would be if I wanted to completely get rid of that 3 that's sitting in front of the parentheses to begin with. And right now when it's sitting in front of the parentheses, it's 3 times that quantity. So what I could do first is divide everything by 3. And I would get the 3's over here on the left to cancel. And I would have 2x plus 4 equals 10. Then what I can do is get rid of that plus 4 by subtracting. Bring that up here. So now it says 2x equals 6, and the last step would be to divide by 2. And I would get x equals 3. Now, the other method would be instead of dividing by that 3 right away, some of you may have wanted to distribute. Because you see those parentheses, and we've talked about in the past about how usually that means multiplication by using the distributive property. So if you distribute, first instead it would say 6x plus 12 equals 30. Then, kind of following the same pattern that we did on that first strategy, I would subtract 12. Bring it up here again. I would have 6x equals 18. And then I would divide by 6. And I would still get 3. So when you're dealing with something like this one, there were a lot of steps that we had to follow there. We had to figure out how to get rid of those parentheses. So I either divided first or I used the distributive property. But then after I had that, I still had a multi-step equation because I had to move a number by adding or subtracting first. And then I had to finish by dividing, in this case by a number. But you might also have to multiply by something. So we've talked about these steps to solving an equation before, and we're going to review them again. Okay, so step 1 is to find the variable that you're solving for. Step 2 is to clear any grouping symbols, parentheses, and a lot of times that's done with multiplication, like that distributive property that I just showed you. Then you want to get the term with the variable alone, so you always need to add or subtract numbers first. Then you move on to doing division or multiplication if you still have a number sitting in front of the letter. So those examples up there kind of went through all of these steps and kind of showed you a way to handle the parentheses and how to solve for that x following these 4 steps here. Now, not all those problems or all problems that you're going to see are going to have as many steps as that last one did. For example, this next one doesn't have any parentheses. It just says 3x plus 5 equals 17. So the first thing I would want to do is figure out like where your x is. Now this x term, 3x, you don't want to do anything with that right now. Right now what you want to do is take care of that 5. You got to get the 3x by itself before you try to do anything with that 3. So you want to start by subtracting this 5. Why subtracting? Well, because it says plus 5. So I always want to do the opposite of what it starts as. Again, in the past we drew our river. If you still need to do that, that's fine. So 5's are gone. You bring down your 3x. Bring down the equal sign. 17 minus 5 is 12. Then you're going to divide by 3. Cross those 3's off. Bring down the x. Bring down the equal sign. 12 divided by 3 would be 4. So x equals 4. Take a minute and do the practice problem on your own. So, first thing I would have done is moved the 5, because I don't want to do anything to that negative 2x term. I got to leave that alone for right now. So I'm going to subtract 5 from a negative 11. So it says negative 2x equals negative 16. Then I would divide by negative 2. And we would have x equals positive 8. For the next one here, it's written very similar to that last practice problem in that they have the x term second. So we got to move that 4 first. And we're going to do that by subtracting the 4 from the 8. So I bring down that negative 2/3 x equals 8 minus 4 would be 4. Now, in section 2, when we were dealing with the one-step equations, we talked about when you have a fraction like this, in order to get rid of it, you need to multiply by its reciprocal. Think of that as 4 over 1. So then we have x equals negative 12 over 2, which would simplify to negative 6. So pause the video here, try this practice problem, and then keep watching when you're ready to see the answer. So you should have started by subtracting 4. So now it says 3/5 x equals 3. Then you multiply by the reciprocal, 5/3, which in this case, you've got a 3 on the top and a 3 on the bottom. Those are eventually going to cancel each other off, and you're going to be left with 5. Now remember, with the grouping symbols, there's more than one way that you can handle a problem like this. A lot of you are going to lean towards the distributive method just because you're so used to doing that, and that is fine. Just make sure that when you multiply, you do it to both terms here. So this becomes 4x plus 8 equals 16. Then we would subtract 8. And so I have 4x equals 8. Then I would divide by 4. So x is going to equal 2. Okay, so again, go ahead and pause the video here and try this practice problem. I would have just started by distributing, so it now says 12x minus 18 equals 6. Add 18 over. So it says 12x equals 24. Then divide by 12. You're going to get x equals 2. For this next example, it starts out on the right or the left-hand side with a big fraction. I would get rid of that 5 first. So remember when we had something in the denominator, to get rid of it, we multiplied by the reciprocal of that. So think of this as a 1 over 5. So the reciprocal of that would just be 5. So when I multiply by 5, all that's left over here on the left side is that 2x plus 3 now. And then equals 35. And now we're back to an equation like we've been dealing with. So I'm going to subtract 3. So I have 2x equals 32. Divide by 2 on both sides. I get x equals 16. Take a minute to do this practice problem and then keep watching the video to see what the answer should have been. So you should have started this the same way, where you multiply by 4 on both sides. You have 3x minus 2 equals 20. You should add 2 over first. So you have 3x equals 22. And when you divide by 3, you can't take 22 divided by 3 evenly. So I would have just left as a fraction. So x equals 22 thirds. Now these next couple of examples, we've actually seen some like these in the past, where we're dealing with consecutive even and odd integers. And if you remember how we set these kinds of problems up, is we had x represent the first number that we didn't know. Now to get to the next even number, we would need to add x plus 2. And then we would have for the third one, x plus 4, since you're skipping over a number, and that would equal 108. Then if you remember, we combined our x's, so there's 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. So 3x, and then our numbers 2 and 4. So we wrote all of ours with 3x plus 6, and then the only number that really changed is what the sum was, so it equals 108. Now to solve this, we subtracted 6 first. So we would have 3x equals 102. Then we would divide by 3. And so we got x equals 34. And so that was the first even digit. So then the next two, if they wanted them, would be 36 and 38. Okay, so for the practice problem here, you're going to set it up the same way because it's consecutive odd integers. So x plus x plus 2 plus x plus 4 equals negative 81. So just watch your signs here on this one. So take a minute and try to finish this one up and find those 3 odd numbers. So when you set this one up and you solved it, you should have gotten for the first, like if you subtract 6, you get 3x equals, now you have to just be really careful here because it's negative 81 minus 6, so that's actually negative 87. Then you divide by 3. And so that should have been negative 29. And then going in a row should have been negative 27, negative 25.